do you see this as a signal that the mood is changing and that national security is now the United States not having its technology sold internationally, not that U.S. technology will be allowed out of the U.S. into, say, China's hands?
Yeah, there's a very specific point of distinction of what the omission of that rulemaking in the GAIN Act provides for. The original proposal was that Nvidia would have to prioritize American customers for the lead edge chips over a potential export customer, which would have, of course, caught China within that. You know, the pieces of news that came out of Jensen Huang's visits to DC yesterday were export controls have been discussed with the president, and we know because Jensen Huang went on a 2.5-hour Joe Rogan podcast that they talk regularly about this issue. They're also, and I'm interested in AMH's take on this, you know, there is very much a consciousness, particularly among Republican lawmakers, that they want, Nvidia wants to be able to export to China, right? But the baseline assumption of this company is zero revenues from that market. The more interesting point here is, what does China want? You know, Jensen, in speaking to reporters, kind of acknowledged, we don't even know that if we were permitted to export the technology, would China take it? And if you look at some of the Bloomberg reporting overnight, there is a clear signal that China isn't necessarily that interested in a deprecated American chip at this moment in time.
Well, yes, he's saying that China will not accept a degraded chip, Ed, but will they accept a high advanced chip, which basically would mean the administration, to Lisa's point, having to do a little bit of reverse course when it comes to national security. Do you think Jensen Huang was able to get that point across in Washington, D.C.? This is his view that he's been lobbying.
Yeah, you know, clearly Jensen and Nvidia are staying in close proximity to the administration, not just the administration, right? Congress, because that's going to be a factor, you know, but Jensen is also not foolish. You know, he literally said, we do not know what the state of play is and whether we'll be able to or not. We've talked a lot, AMH, about this spectrum of China hawkishness. At one end, you have the China hawks who say we must not sell this technology under any circumstances, with particular anxiety that China will use the technology for military purposes. But at the other end, and those close to the president advising him, there is a softer attitude, which is it is better to sell some sort of technology, but it must be deprecated to China, than none at all, because that will create a vacuum if we sell none at all, a vacuum by which, you know, China's domestic players will occupy and then potentially move ahead of the United States. Again, another thing that simply Jensen Huang said to reporters overnight was America is still ahead, but, you know, be very clear about the threat and potential competition that China poses, which isn't new. He said that so many times.
Just quickly here, Ed, it does seem like Jensen Huang has had the lead position, the pole position when it comes to Washington, D.C. and influencing President Trump. It seems like Alphabet's AI chips are gaining ground when it comes to the rest of the universe. How do you parse that out? How much ground do you actually see the Google chips as gaining?
I don't hear any other word more often than TPU. Every single day, TPU, TPU, TPU. You know, markets have moved in recent weeks when there's been reports that Alphabet is considering allowing third parties to take the product, selling it through Google Cloud Platform. The technology pushback on that would be that TPUs are designed for a very narrow and specific use case, whereas GPUs, from Nvidia principally, but also AMD, have much broader application. They're much more diverse. It's the thing that everyone is waiting on. And if there is clear, tangible evidence of displacement, in other words, a big technology company opting for Alphabet's TPUs over an Nvidia, in that circumstance, then it would be evidence that the market's moving forward on this. And it's no surprise that, once again, it's one of the most read stories on the terminal today.